Zadrizes buzdari skozdał.
This is a really interesting chapter. Typically I was breaking down last year. I was breaking down just chapters that I would find interesting. So let's continue that, right? I don't need this huge, ridiculous introduction. This is patron only, exclusive. Thank you so much for joining here and giving me your support monthly. So to start out with, this is Sam's third POV in A Storm of Swords. Sam has just escaped the mutiny at Craster's. He basically held Craster in his dying moments, and his POV picks back up with him and Gilly out in the north of the wall wilds, right? Making their way, desperately trying to make their way back to Castle Black. What's interesting, right, is that the TV show, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I do remember Sam giving, basically telling Jorah when he's, peeling the grayscale off of him. Sam kind of tells him, does he mention it? I don't know. But it's going to be, Sam's probably going to be the one to tell Jorah, that his father wanted him to ultimately join Night's Watch, right? Like Jorah, backtracking a bit, Jorah was kicked out of, Mormont, being head of House Mormont, right, by Ned Stark. Ned Stark caught Jorah basically selling poachers as slaves, and that's highly illegal in Westeros. Ned, being who he is, would not tolerate that. Jorah's not a POV character, but we do get Daenerys' POV, and in Daenerys' POV, Jorah kind of tells us what happened, right? So Jorah was married to this Hightower bitch who was basically a gold digger. Long story short, she was a gold digger. She looked like Daenerys, right? So because she looks like Daenerys, this Hightower woman that Jorah married, right, we assume that the Hightowers, their looks haven't been described officially in the books, but we assume that they look like they're Valyrian descent. A lot of people, myself included, think the Hightowers actually descended from the first race of dragon-riding individuals, pre-Valyrians, right? They're the ones who taught the Valyrians how to tame dragons, but they're long since forgotten. Obviously, those dragon lords pre-Valyria, right? So not the Valyrians, pre the rise of Valyria. The first, or maybe even the second or third, people that tame dragons. It's like a group of individuals. The Valyrians are just the most recent ones, right? But obviously, dragons have been used in the formation of the Five Forts of Yeti, and those have been around for thousands of years, right? They are potentially have been around longer than first men going into Westeros, right? So whoever was riding around with these dragons initially, right before the Valyrians, probably went to Old Town, and there was a massive battle that was fought there between Valyrians or pre-Valyrians, right? So I guess you could say something like the prototype Valyrians, right? The original dragon race that probably comes somewhere from a Shire or whatever. They're just dead, right? Kind of the similar thing that happened to the Valyrians. The Valyrians have died out. There's people with Valyrian blood all over the place, but not of the dragon riding blood, right? So, the Targaryens are the last noble house that rode dragons from there that we know of, and they're dwindling down left and right. So, whoever this race of dragon riders, in my opinion, fucked someone who ended up building the Hightower, and that's how the Hightowers have so much power, and have been around in Old Town and worked with the Maesters since the dawn of history, really, right? So anyway, getting way back on track here, Jorah explains to Daenerys that this, I keep wanting to say Lynesse Hightower. I don't know if that's her name though. Lynesse or Lynesse might be the most current form of Hightowers in power. Ha ha ha, you like that rhyme. Not the one that Jorah married, but there's Leighton. Is it Leighton? There's the Hightower in power right now is a mysterious dude. He hasn't descended the Hightower in 10 years, right? And this is in Old Town, and they work with the Maesters. So it's really weird that he hasn't been seen publicly in 10 years. But he's got a daughter and a son, and his daughter is said to be a witch. She supposedly practices the dark arts. But anyway, this woman who Jorah married, who's a Hightower, ended up taking all of his money, right? Like, Jorah was deeply, madly in love with her, but she kind of was, like, not fucking with him all that much, right? You'll find out why I say that here in a second. But basically, Jorah was forced to the point where he had to sell a lot of his personal possessions. It's actually kind of tragic, right? So, obviously, she's a gold digger, right? But the fault kind of lies on Jorah as well, because he thought he was going to continuously be good at tourneys, right? So he wins one tourney, gets a decent amount of gold, right? And this is kind of how he gets Lynesse to, fall in love with him. Ultimately, he travels around entering all these different tourneys and starts losing really badly. Because when you lose a tourney, you don't just lose and like you take a besmirch to your name or whatever the fuck. You actually have to ransom back your armor and your horse, right? So if you lose enough times, you're eventually going to go into debt, right? This is what happened with Jorah. So he's into debt. His wife likes fancy shit. She's making him spend all the money he does have. So eventually, he's in Bear Island. They have to go home, right? They have to, the money runs out and Jorah is no longer good enough to compete in tourneys. So they decide, let's head back to Bear Island. And when they do this, Jorah catches some poachers poaching on his land and he sells them into slavery. He gets caught by Ned, and this is where Ned exiles Jorah. This is where Jorah goes across the Narrow Sea and tries to buy his way back into the kingdom by spying on Daenerys, right? So, long story short, I don't know what the fuck, I can't remember what the fuck happened on the TV show, but I think the show's way of showing you that there's a connection between Jorah and Sam because of Jeor's last moments. Like Jeor Mormont, the old bear, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, spent his dying moments with Sam. So I can't remember exactly what the fuck Sam says to him with the grayscale on the TV show, but I feel like in the books, when Jorah finally does come back to Westeros and he's like fighting in the north or somewhere where Sam runs into him, he's going to tell him, your dad wanted you to join the Night's Watch. Why don't you come fucking join us? And maybe ultimately he will convince Daenerys to go and fight up north. Who knows? All right, so getting back on track here. Sam has just spent Jeor Mormont's dying moments with him on the floor of Craster's Keep, and they've escaped. So we're the third POV for Storm. Let's 10 minutes into this fucking, or 7 minutes into the thing, and I haven't even started talking about it yet. But all of that's required. I feel like I have to mention all that because I won't be able to explain everything as thoroughly as I want to unless I sort of like obviously refresh you guys listening to this, but also myself. My brain is like kind of jumbled right now. Anyway, Sam and Gilly arrive at this village that Sam thinks is called White Tree. The reason why Sam thinks that he knows the name of this village is because, like I mentioned before, they're making their way from Craster's Keep to the wall to go into Castle Black and be safe, right? But there's a long distance in between Craster's Keep and the wall, long enough so that, like, it's so far that when the Rangers are traveling that far, they actually have to stop, like, before they get to the Forbidden Forest or whatever, at Craster's Keep to take shelter, to eat, sleep, rest up, warm, potentially if they have hypothermia, and then either make their way, continuing into the Frostfangs or something further north of the wall, or going back to Castle Black. So Craster's Keep just had this mutiny. Craster is a bit of a dickhead, and I actually just did a video talking about Craster and how he fucks all of his kids, right, and super incestuous, and how he may have be a bastard of Bloodraven or something, or he may have the right idea in worshiping these others as opposed to trying to fight them, like Jon Snow and the Night's Watch is doing, and maybe that's why Craster was safe for so long. But anyway, Sam still hasn't made it back to Castle Black. He's coming across all these villages, and he mentions to himself, all these fucking wildling villages look the same. Like, literally, there's no discernible thing in them aside from this is this village and this is the next one. He thinks most of them, or he remembers rather, that most of them have a white tree, right? Like a weirwood tree in the center of the village, and the village is kind of built out around that. And the reason why White Tree is called White Tree, even though a lot of wildling villages have weirwoods at the center, so it's not that special, is White Tree's weirwood tree is massive. It's like something like 3 times the size of an average weirwood tree. It's been around for a long fucking time. And Sam's third POV chapter in A Storm of Swords starts out with him going, White Tree? Are we at White Tree? And the reason why Sam thinks this is because the whole journey that Sam and the Night's Watch Jeor Mormont and that massive ranging that he leads north of the wall to go figure out what's happening to not only Benjen Stark, but also the Wildlings. They're disappearing from their villages. When on that ranging, it's Sam's job to chart all of these villages and to write down their names. So when Sam's making his way back with Gilly and her baby to the wall, Sam is trying to remember some of the villages that he encountered north, right? So he's like, please let this be White Tree. Please let this be White Tree. And what they end up doing is sort of setting up camp for the night, right? So initially, Sam tells Gilly to go, like, start a fire. It's kind of funny, actually. Sam fucking sucks at wilderness stuff, and he would not have gotten a badge in fire starting in the Boy Scouts. He fucking sucks at that, so he's like, he leaves Gilly to do that, but he doesn't actually say it's because he sucks, so he just thinks to himself, like, man, I'll just fuck it up anyway. He's like, George is, like, I don't know if George is, wrote Sam's character like him, but it's really funny, because, like, it kind of, even though Sam is such a bitch, him not being able to do certain manly things that are expected of him, and then thinking about how he's, how he's incapable of doing that, it's kind of hilarious. It reminds me of certain things with myself. That's why I started getting into cars. I felt like I couldn't do certain thing that men's do. Like, for instance, I cannot operate heavy machinery. I can't operate a crane, right? Or, like, I watched this dude on YouTube who does, like, literally anything you could think of construction-wise in grading, like, just any machine, he can figure it out and fucking use it and become a professional at it, right? So, it's just interesting to see Sam thinking about how he lacks at being a man, you know what I mean? Because I feel that way, too, sometimes. So, it's really funny. He's like, the last time he tried to start a fire, he used his fucking knife, right? And he cut his finger. He cut his hand. He couldn't even start the fucking fire when literally Sam's like, when I took Flint, the last time I took Flint to steel, I cut my finger. I prefer to leave that for the women. Like, he left it for Gilly, who's this savage wildling woman, to do it, right? Like, in his mind anyway, right? So I don't know, it was pretty interesting. But anyway, Sam actually goes out to look into the huts that are in the village that he thinks is White Tree, but then shortly after looking around, he realizes that it's not White Tree. This is just some random village, because White Tree's Weirwood Tree, that compared to the village they're in, was much larger than that one. So anyway, he also thinks, like, oh, this is White Tree. John already looked through all these houses when we were here with the Night's Watch, and he didn't find shit anyway. So he kind of is just doing this just because they're so desperate, but he ends up walking into, a few different houses, finds fucking nothing, right? And then he eventually drops down in front of the Weirwood Tree and says a prayer. And if he hadn't done this, he would have been fucked. Him and Gilly would have died. It's very clear to me now that obviously he, spoiler alert, I'm going to end up talking about it anyway, he gets saved by Cold Hands, right? That's the only way he makes it out. But ultimately, if he hadn't did this moment where he drops down and says this prayer in front of the Weirwood Tree, he would have likely died, because I'll get to it in a minute, right? But Sam, just in pure desperation, after he looks around the village a little bit, after he has Gilly and her baby setting up a fire, right? Because remember, he cut his finger on this flint, right? He just pure desperation drops to his knees and goes, "Oh Lord," or he doesn't say this verbatim, but he basically explains, like, look, I took my gods are the gods of the seven, right? If I'm not mistaken, I think Sam ends up, is it this chapter? I can't remember if it happens this chapter or his previous POV, because the events are so close together. But Sam ends up singing a song to the baby, right? To Gilly's baby. And Sam has a lot of internal monologue going on while he's having the moment in the scene where he mentions, he's basically trying to cheer Gilly up. He's like, yo, we got all this cool shit at Castle Black. And he's like, yo, we got this fucking fire that stays burning all the time, because they're freezing, right? They're cold as shit. So he's just trying to, even though he's miserable and fucking wants to get the fuck out of their situation, right? To get warm. He's like, let me help Gilly out. She's got a freaking baby, right? Let me try to convince her and explain to her how awesome Castle Black is going to be. And he like explains to her the defenses. He explains to her how the castle's made out of stone, and it's got, like I said, a massive fire burning all day, and it's really cute. Gilly goes, "Can I stand by it? Do you think I'd mind if me and the baby would stand by there? Not all day, just long enough to get warm, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course you could fucking do that, you crazy bitch. Why wouldn't we let you do that? Are you stupid?" Right? Gilly is a wee bit a little bit stupid, right? She's simple, but she's also a genius in other ways, right? So, anyway, when it comes to, like, formalities and manners and stuff, she's really ignorant, right? But, for instance, staying alive and surviving in the wild, just the basic thing of starting a fire she can do. So, call her retard if you want. She's got the smarts where it counts. Anyway, Sam's... It's weird to not do this with a camera because I keep looking at the camera and realizing that it's not there, but I keep making facial expressions as if the camera was there. It's just nuts. Yeah, the edible kicked in. Yeah, I love to wait to record until that happens. So anyway, Sam's trying to cheer her up, right? And it's so funny. He can't help but be a man while he's trying to do it because in his head, he thinks of like, oh, wait, no, that's his dream. So he has this dream later on. That scene does happen. I just can't remember if it's in Sam's third POV or in his second POV. But there's another moment where Sam has a dream, right? This is after getting back on track here. This is after Sam prays in front of the weirwood tree. Him and Gilly pack it in for the night, right? They go to sleep. Sam is having a dream that he's at Heartsbane. Or I'm sorry, he's at Heartsbane. He's using Heartsbane to carve up a turkey, and every single person is there with him. So all of his friends from the Night's Watch are there, and even Jeor Mormont's there, and Jeor's dead. And it's a lot of the other people that are there are dead too, right? Or eventually going to be dead. So anyway, everybody's having a good time. It's awesome. Sam's using Heartsbane to carve up a bird. He's serving everybody at feast. And instead of wearing their Night's Watch robes, they're all wearing bright colors, he thinks. And that's literally just their regular clothing, right? In the Night's Watch, they wear all black. Their banner is a black banner, whereas like a lot of the houses and heraldry, sigils, and all that good shit in Westeros are bright ass colors. For instance, Renly, he has something called a Rainbow Guard, where he has a different color knight for all the different colors of the rainbow that help protect him in his royal King's Guard, right? So Brienne of Tarth is the blue knight, and she's got all this steel that's been blued to reminisce, or to look like the color blue, and also she wears this really bright blue cloak, right? He's got like a pink one and all the different colors. Well, I guess pink isn't in the rainbow, is it? But he's got all the different colors. It's way brighter than the Game of Thrones TV show. House of the Dragon, they've kind of tried to stay more canonically correct when it comes to how people dressed, right? But that's one of the things that makes George's world so fantastical when you're reading it, is you get these bright descriptions of colors. And for instance, some people, like Brienne, when she first shows up, when you're reading about her through Catelyn's POV, you see that, she is bright as fuck and kind of stands out above all the other knights, right? And for instance, Renly himself, King Renly, Robert Baratheon's younger brother, has green enameled steel armor. It's so rich, the color of green, that when Catelyn looks in it, she sees her eyes reflected back, and she thinks like, oh, that looks like my eyes reflected in a deep, deep pool, a deep well that's emerald green, right? So it's really cool. Anyway, getting back on track here. I forgot what the track was. Oh yeah, so Sam is having the dream, right? And then the meal ends in this dream, and then Sam ends up making his way to go upstairs. And when he does this in the dream, instead of going to the Lord and Lady's chambers, where his father and mother reside, right? Instead of Sam going there to call it a night, because clearly he's the Lord in this dream, he goes to his old bedroom that he used to share with his sisters, and he goes into the room, and guess what? Gilly's there, and her titties are out, and they're leaking breast milk. So it's kind of interesting. Sam wants to fuck Gilly this whole time that he's helping her in the wild. Anyway, get back on track here. What ends up happening is, after the dream, Sam wakes up because he's cold. He's cold as shit. And, well, this is a Song of Ice and Fire, so you're not just cold for no goddamn reason, right? He's cold because the fucking White Walkers have showed up. he sees Tall Paul. Well, actually, he sees a figure at the door of the place where him and Gilly are sleeping, right? This is a deserted wildling village, so it's basically abandoned, and Sam and Gilly are the only ones in this village, and the whites and White Walkers are sort of, well, the whites. There's no White Walkers in this scene. They're just undead whites. They go into the hut, and they go and find Sam and Gilly. They're sleeping, and then eventually the creature comes closer and closer, and then Sam realizes it's Tall Paul. So he quickly springs into action, right? And he tells Gilly, grab the horse, go outside, get the baby, mount out there, and go, right? Basically, he's distracting the White Walker. So when he does this, he remembers that he grabbed Mormont's obsidian dagger, right? His dragon glass dagger, and he tries to stab at Tall Paul with it, but Tall Paul's wearing armor, so the dragon glass dagger actually shatters. May thy knife chip and shatter. Dune reference. Dune reference, biatch. But anyway, he tries to kill Tall Paul with the obsidian dagger, which is something that Sam has done before. That's how he killed the White Walker. That's how he got the nickname Sam the Slayer, right? So Tall Paul's wearing armor, and the obsidian dagger chips, right? So Sam is kind of fucked, right? And what's interesting, let me backtrack a bit here, is the reason why this scene is even more fucked up that it's Tall Paul is because if it wasn't for Tall Paul, Sam would be dead, right? So when the Night's Watch gets attacked at the Fist of the First Men by the whites and the others, they all start running and head back to Craster's Keep. Sam is running with those motherfuckers, and he just sort of falls to the ground and just willingly accepts death until Tall Paul shows up and carries him back. So this is now after that. After the mutiny at Craster's Keep, Tall Paul was killed, and he's now come back undead, right, to kill Sam. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention. Before Sam tries to stab him with the obsidian dagger, so it's before Sam really gets close enough to approach him, he notices that he's got a raven on his fucking shoulder, right? The raven is actually pecking the flesh of Tall Paul, right? And that's a hint for what's going to happen at the end of the POV. So the raven doesn't really give a shit that Tall Paul is a walking person. The raven knows that Tall Paul's dead and is still willingly eating Tall Paul's face. So yeah, it's a clue to what happens at the end, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that the raving seemingly are on the side of good. In some instances, like Mormont's raven, but then also they could be on the side of like neutral, I guess, right? Because Mormont's raven eats his face after he dies, right? So anyway, getting way back on track here. The dagger chips and shatters, and then Sam ends up getting choked out, like really, really choked out, right? And it's really gut-wrenching for him, not only because he's seeing one of his former Night's Watch brothers dead, right, but now come back to life, but then also he saved Sam's life by carrying him. And Sam's like, this is even more fucked up, right? Because Tall Paul's the only person that could have did it. Nobody else could have lifted Sam's fat ass up in the air, but Tall Paul did it, right? So anyway, all in the midst of this, Sam's being attacked by the whites. He's about to die several times, right? Like, he keeps thinking, this is my last moments. And then eventually, he realizes, oh shit, Tall Paul is, well, fucking tall. And he's actually not called Tall Paul, he's called Small Paul. I don't know if I've been interchanging that this whole recording or if it's just this one time, but just know his name is Small Paul because he's a fucking giant. He's a little bit dumb, he's dull-witted, right? But he's tall as shit. So anyway, he picks Sam up to save him. Now Sam's having to kill him after he's already died as a white, right? So Sam remembers that he still weighs more than Tall Paul, right? So he uses his weight, shifts it, and then knocks him to the ground, right? When he does this, Sam tries to grab another dagger, but can't make it through the white's armor again. So then finally, Sam ends up seeing something orange glowing out of the corner of his eyes and ends up moving his weight again, shifting around until you can finally like crawl backwards on the floor to grab this glowing orange thing, and then he just fire punch, flame punch, Falcon Fire, right? Can't remember what video game that's from. Oh yeah, F-Zero X, right? But Falcon punches small Tall Paul in the face, and then he's a white. Small Paul's a white, so he doesn't really feel the shit, and he just keeps choking Sam, right? And I've read this book 9 times, but every time I get to this chapter, I'm like, oh no, Sam's gonna die. Oh no, Sam Ganji. No, Samwise, don't do it, Samwell. Potatoes, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew, right? But no, it doesn't happen. It just takes a second, but the embers that Sam Falcon fire punched this nigga in the face with, it just takes a second, right, for it to catch fire, because the white is like wheezing in and out, like, and then eventually the fire lights his whole jaw, his whole shit his whole shit is lit up, and then he dies, right? But before that, Sam, when he's being choked out, is really cool imagery, because Sam is like, he's losing oxygen to his brain, his eyesight's failing, and then eventually he loses sight of everything around him, and the only thing he can see is these 2 blue stars in a black field, like a black empty sky, and that's the eyes of the white. The eyes of the white. The eyes of the white. That's some dyslexia pro for you. Dyslexia. I don't know. I was going to do a commercial. I don't know. But anyway, as you can tell, we're getting towards the end of the chapter. So Sam destroys this motherfucker because he fire punches him. It just takes a second. It's like a delay. It's a lag. Sam hits lag. And then the white dies, right? And then Sam goes running outside. And he's like, Gilly, get the baby. We're going to go. I just killed the fucking white. And then he stops midway and sees that Gilly is in a situation that's very similar to a Walking Dead, right? Or in any zombie movie. On any zombie movie, you go into the house, or you're being chased by zombies, then you find this house, then you go into it, and then the zombie starts breaking in through the boards, right? Gilly is very much in this situation up against the weirwood tree. So 2 things I actually were wondering in this situation. Please let me know your thoughts down below. One is, did the prayer help? Is that what called Cold Hands to summon, as you're about to find out when I finish explaining it? Or if you've already read this before. And then the second question is, Gilly is at the weirwood tree, and the whites seemingly are obviously, they're going to attack her, but because she's at the weirwood tree, is it because she's at the weirwood tree that they haven't gotten to her yet? Is it kind of like, churches and vampires? Like vampires can't go into churches kind of shit? Or witches, whatever the fuck, can't go to graveyards? Is it a similar situation to that? I don't know. Because when Sam sees her, they're actually ripping the fucking horse apart. Remember I told you, Sam, as soon as Shaw Paul, Tujeka shows up, Sam sends her the fuck out. He's like, go, leave, bitch, run, get with the horse, get the fuck out, right? So it makes you wonder if Gilly would have been attacked if she maybe climbed up into the tree. That's what I'm curious about. Would Gilly have been attacked if she just climbed up into the tree? Because Sam prayed at the tree, and he ultimately gets helped by Cold Hands, right? But then also, like, this is the same magic that is keeping the whites and the White Walkers alive, because we know the Children of the Forest are linked to, they made some kind of weapon to fight the First Men. That weapon on the TV show was the White Walkers, the Night King, right? So it makes you wonder, like, this is the same magic, like, when you read Bloodraven's POV, I fucking wish. When you read Breanne's POV, you realize that the Children of the Forest are in a very similar state underneath the earth. They're just not moving around. Instead, they're moving around through crows. But ultimately, they're undead, because it's post their death, right? So, I don't know. Anyway, getting back on track here. Sam goes outside, sees Gilly surrounded by all these White Walkers. It's really graphic. Their horses being ripped apart. These Garen, the little baby, they're not babies, but small horses. They're really sure-footed that they use in the north. They're basically ponies, right? Large ponies. They use these horses in the north because they're the only horses that can make it through the snow and climb up these steep-ass fucking hills that they need them to. So the Garen's being ripped apart. Like, Sam is really close with his horse. He's like, he lets Gilly ride on it because Sam is fat ass. It actually rides a old mule horse because Sam is, he's a big boy, but he needs a bigger horse anyway. So George is good about writing just a few lines to make you feel something for this imaginary animal in this imaginary world that he created, right, from nothing, right? So anyway, the horse is having its entrails ripped apart. Gilly's at the tree with the baby, screaming, "No, Sam, help me, they're gonna eat my face off and rape my butt." Sorry, that's not funny. Anal rape is not funny. It is not funny. But if the monsters did that, would that not be an extra layer of fear. Like, yo, not only are these monsters going to kill me, they're going to rape my corpse in the butt. All right, let's move on. So, anyway, Sam sees this going down, and you know what he says? Fuck. Like, he's literally like, okay, well, we're about to die, right? He's like, how can this happen? He fights with Tall Paul for like half a page, right? For like a full page, he's wrestling with this motherfucker, and then he finally kills him, and then he goes outside, and this bitch got herself trapped by all the other whites. It's interesting, when Sam first looks out, he sees several people that he recognizes from the Night's Watch immediately. He sees this dude, Chet, who Chet's the opening POV for Storm of Swords. Chet is at the Fist of the First Men when the whites attack, and then Chet is ultimately killed. But Chet was the guy in the books. He's a fucking asshole, and he's like, his character kind of makes sense because he's replaced by, like, Sam makes his life way harder because John gets Sam to be a steward and work with Maester Aemon, reading books and helping Maester Aemon write letters and ultimately becoming a Maester, right? And in doing so, he replaces this dude Chet as a steward, right? So Chet is forced to become like the Lord of Dogs. He becomes the kennel master, right? So Chet legitimately fucking hates Sam, whereas on the TV show, the dude who they had play the version of Chet just didn't like Jon Snow because he got beat up in the scrapyard and ultimately mutinied at Craster's Keep. That didn't fucking happen in the books. Chet gets killed, but he's planning a mutiny at the Fist of the First Men. He's planning on killing Sam in his sleep, killing all of them, like people that, so Commander Gior, all the people that would stop him from going back to Craster's, right, and living it up there, right? But he ends up dying because the whites show up. It's really funny. You kind of see his true character because he pisses his pants when the whites show up. Like, he probably wouldn't have mutinied against nothing or done shit because he pissed his pants when the whites show up. And he's got the same level of courage as Sam because Sam pisses his pants often in the books. Specifically, when Tall Paul shows up, Sam pee-pees his pants. He pee-pee the panta, pee-pee the panta, panta pee-pee the boy. Sam pee-pee his pants. Sam pee-pee pants, pee-pee Sam pants. I'm really high. Anyway, all right, so, Sam is seeing all these people who he formerly were, hanging out with at Castle Black. They're about to kill Gilly, right? Then eventually, something happens where literally the world changes. These lines, when I read them, or when I listen to them, they remind me of, this is the closest A Song of Ice and Fire gets to Lord of the Rings, right? So Lord of the Rings is very, J.R. Tolkien has the best prose because he wrote his books in a time where he's a very creative person, but also there hadn't been certain things done in fantasy books. So Tolkien was able to create a bunch of shit that now modern fantasy uses. Like the scene where the trees start moving. So Gilly, like I just had set up, Gilly is being attacked by all these whites. She's about to die. The horse is being ripped up. She's with her baby around this weirwood tree. Sam is off in the distance. It doesn't matter if he was closer to get to her. He struggled so much with one white. There's now hundreds of whites around her, right? Surrounding her. They're all about to die. And oh shit, I don't know how the fuck I missed this. Gilly tells Sam that the whole reason why Tall Paul is there, they don't know the other whites are outside yet, but the whole reason why Tall Paul is there is because he smells the baby. The baby is actually in Game of Thrones. He goes into A Song of Ice and Fire Walmart and shoots several of the Night's Watch. Remember, the baby. No, I'm just kidding. Gilly tells Sam that Tall Paul can smell the baby. So that's what drew them there. They want that sacrifice that didn't happen, that Craster was going to give them. And that's really interesting. So it makes you wonder if that's not the whole reason why they start moving down south, is they are godly type creatures that want, they can't procreate, and I've done 1,000 theories on this shit, but the White Walkers can't procreate, so the only way they can is by sacrifices. They take those male babies, bastards, right? Incestuous bastards, purified blood, and they end up becoming White Walker generals, or just versions of the Night King, right? People keep saying the Night King doesn't exist in the books. Technically, no, But the Night's King does. He was a character. We don't know if he's alive, just like you don't know the fate of a lot of characters in the fucking A Song of Ice and Fire books. You don't know the fate of fucking this dude who lived 120 years. His name is Bloodraven. Then you find out in Bran's POV, oh, this nigga's still alive. He's sending dreams to people south of the wall. He lived 100 years ago, right? He was on some mystical shit, right? So, it's almost anything is possible. But anyway, it's kind of interesting that I got to said all that shit, and I really completely forgot what my point was. Oh, yeah. The White Walkers procreating. So, yeah, Gilly tells Sam this, and then the White Walkers show up, right? Setting up the scene again. Sam is watching Gilly about to be eaten alive, and then the trees start moving. Like I said, this is very similar to Lord of the Rings passages. The trees start moving. The world changes. Like, literally, there's just something in the air, but Sam can't quite put his finger on it. It's a magical summoning, right? There's thousands of ravens that appear, along with this weird shift in the world that Sam knows, right? Without reading the exact passage, it's hard. I'm trying to put it in my own words, right? I'm sure you all listen to this have read it, like I said, but just that instance happens, and thousands of ravens show up, and guess what? They fucking start rolling on the whites. They just launch at them. They start picking off their faces. And remember how I told you it was a hint? When Tall Paul showed up and he's got the raven on his shoulder and is eating his face? That's the hint to this point right here, right? Where the ravens are now fucking attacking all of the whites and saving Sam, allowing him to, sort of not get Gilly and her baby immediately killed, because ultimately this dude known as Cold Hands shows up, slays some whites, right, and then ultimately grabs Gilly, throws her on his back. The chapter ends with Sam reaching for his hand to get up. So this dude, Cold Hands, has swagger. He's got like a 10 to 12 foot size fucking elk, and nobody in the story so far has ridden anything other than horses, and big horses. Okay, and fucking woolly mammoths, the giants and their hairy asses on their woolly mammoths, right? But whatever. Woolly mammoth is cool. Actually, I would much rather have a woolly mammoth as my mount as opposed to a fucking elk. But anyway, an elk's dope. This dude's got swagger, right? He's garbed in Night's Watch, attire. And when he first shows up, before anything happens, he goes, "Brother!" And he yells for Sam. So Sam's like, oh, this nigga's a fucking Night's Watch dude. He's wearing all black, right? So anyway, he saves Gilly and the baby. And then he comes over to Sam, and Sam, he puts out a gloved hand, right? And I just did air quotations, but you can't fucking see that. He puts out a gloved hand and reaches for Sam, and then Sam realizes, oh, this isn't a gloved hand. This is black. This is a black guy. I don't like black people. Sam's extremely racist, and that's the reveal that happens in this chapter. Is just Sam doesn't like black people, and it's really interesting because later on when he goes to Bravos, he ends up getting saved by black people, the Summer Islanders and Kuhuro, and they take him on a ship, but they try to steal his books, but they take him on a ship, but Sam's... Anyway, obviously that doesn't fucking happen. No, his hands are black because he's dead. He's dead like all the creatures that are about to kill Gilly until he shows up. So the chapter ends on this ominous note of Sam being like, oh, fuck, is this guy one of them? Right? And then you quickly find out, no, he isn't. But then there's a similar reveal with Breanne later on in Bran's POV chapters in the Dance with Dragons. You realize Cold Hands doesn't breathe, and Breanne is like, yo, are you fucking dead, bro? And like, there's that ominous kind of thing. But anyway, Cold Hands' true identity hasn't been revealed yet. George fucked up majorly by not making him binging. But also George is a really good author, so his identity reveal of Cold Hands is probably going to be much more interesting. And George probably won't even tell us in the main story. We'll find out Cold Hands is probably one of the archers that went north with Bloodraven, and he's one of his Raven's Teeth archer. I know it's a really popular fan theory because that's kind of one of the only things that make sense, right? So when Bloodraven's sent to the wall, all of his closest archers go with him. And I've said this before, but I think his archers' bones... they're supposed to be wargs. They all use weirwood bows and dragon glass tipped arrows. And that's like the strongest combination outside of a dragon bow that the Summer Islanders use, right? So these archers go with Brendan Rivers, Bloodraven, north of the wall when King Egg the Unlikely, and then Duncan Egg's story sends him to the wall for betraying the command of the king. Like, Aegon the crown promised fealty to one of the last Blackfires. And well, actually not. There's a few more generations after that, but one of the last direct descendants of Daemon Blackfire of the Blackfire rebellions. And then instead of giving him like safe conduct, he ends up killing him. Right? There was a great council that was called, and then this dude, I think it was like Hagon or some shit, shows up, and instead of being safe, Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven, kills him. So when King Egg the Unlikely is chosen at that great council in 230 or some shit AC, the first thing Egg does is send Bloodraven to the wall. Right? He's like, dude, I'm not going to execute you, but you go to the fucking wall. And Brynden Rivers willingly does so. And he becomes Lord Commander, and then eventually disappears on a ranging something like 12 years later. So Bloodraven has already interacted with Duncan Egg in the Mystery Knight, the latest Song of Ice and Fire book in the Hedge Knight series, when that came out. But we haven't seen how close they get. And we do know that Bloodraven is the hand of the king to Aerys the First, Daenerys' father's namesake, and he's into the dark arts, right? So we will see what happens with Bloodraven and his relationship with King Aegon the Unlikely, who banishes him to the wall, right? And when, like I said before, when Brynden goes there, he takes all these archers with him who have the ability to warg, and you would assume that Brynden is close with them, right? And he ends up eating them because their bones are just, laying around the floor of the cave when Bran first sees him. The reason why I say he probably ate them is because when someone close to you dies, you bury them in the ground, right? You lay them to rest properly, but these bones are just kind of piled up and scattered. So it's like he was eating them. And then also there's the Jojen pace theory where like Jojen is really sick and he knows he's going to die soon. And then in Bran's POV, he kind of disappears. In Bran's last POV, Bran's drinking this soup that's this weirwood paste sap turned into a tea, and it's got bloody veins in it, right? So people think that, or people know that from World of Ice and Fire, Children of the Forest and the wargs used to consume flesh to gain more powers. I can't remember the exact passage, but that's something they did. They practiced cannibalism, right? And they would hang the entrails from the weirwood trees, right? They would do it. The first men would do it with criminals, but the Children of the Forest would do it with anyone who was their enemies. So the first, giants, anyway, getting way back on track here, getting back on track is going to be into this video. It's 41 minutes for a 10-page Samwell chapter. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this. Sorry you couldn't see my face, and thank you for watching. Long night, my Patreon.